Welcome back to the Cryptid Council. It's Larson Edson. Thank you for being here today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, please feel free to reach out using the email in the description below if you have any suggestions for content, or especially if you have any historical references, subtle and hard to find historical references, journals, books, magazine or newspaper articles, things like that you would like to share with me that are relevant to the cryptid search and cryptid research, and or if you have any personal encounters of your own or your friends and family that you would like to share. With that, today, let's get into talking about celebrities, famous people, noteworthy individuals throughout history who have seen and or have evidence-based beliefs in Bigfoot. Our first celebrity today is going to be famous actor Rob Lowe, and his encounter is significant from the Lowe files, which he did with his sons, because I think that it sets a good understanding of how pop culture and the predominant prevailing culture of our time has kind of dictated that we are supposed to feel about the topic of cryptids in general, and specifically of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I think that this encounter and his account of what he experienced really does a good job of speaking to exactly how ostracized this topic is in our communities. I will play at least parts of some of the clips here today. I will also be linking them down below and some of the references where you can go and research these citations that I will be mentioning further for yourself. But what we will see here with Rob Lowe is that he tells us very clearly via the Joe Rogan program that he and his sons and some other people who they hired went out into Area X of Arkansas to look for Sasquatch, where there was allegedly a hotspot. And what Rob Lowe says is that his sons saw them, and Rob Lowe heard them. He heard their lip smacking and I believe clapping and tree knocking throughout the night, and he heard them moving through the bushes. In other words, they experienced them firsthand. Rob Lowe heard them, and his very own sons who were there with him told him that they saw them.
And that was where we had some really radical experiences, where I heard stuff. And
you heard
Matthew,
stuff?
Oh yeah, I heard like lip popping, and chest beating.
Really? Like you really think it was real?
I heard chest beating. I don't know.
You know who made it?
It was crazy. Matthew, my youngest son, through the thermal imaging, saw him hiding, doing the thing.
So you
hide
really
behind the tree.
think that Bigfoot's real?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like the slogan for the Lowe files was, "It's more fun to believe."
It definitely is more fun to believe.
And that's really where I come down on. It's like, I don't have a dog in the fight, but it's way more fucking fun.
For sure.
Now, with that in mind, notice how Rob Lowe reacts when Joe Rogan says, "So you believe in Bigfoot?" Rob Lowe says, and here, I'll play the clip.
You think that Bigfoot's real?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like the slogan for the Lowe files was, "It's more fun to believe."
Look at that. How odd is that? Just think about the level of programming and propaganda and the threat of being ostracized that there has to be around a topic when you yourself experienced it firsthand. You heard it, and your own sons who were there with you looking through a thermal viewfinder told you that they saw it. And yet your reaction is, I don't know if I believe or not. Just think about that. How very strange that you yourself experienced a thing, and because of the social pressures, including Joe Rogan, who is a notorious Bigfoot critic who thinks that it's all bunk and it's all absolute nonsense, and he's gone out of his way to even say that basically he thinks that the vast majority of people who believe in this topic are crazy in some way or another. So when faced with this overwhelming pressure from society and the pointed pressure specifically from the representative of society and of the prevailing societal opinion, Joe Rogan, when faced with that, Rob Lowe says two things. He says, number one, I experienced it. I was in the woods. We were there where there was no one else around us, and we heard these huge things all around us at night. That's number one. And number two, my sons, who were there with me looking through a thermal viewfinder, saw these things. He says those two main points, and then when asked, so you believe they're real? He goes, I don't know, man. This is what modern culture has done to honest opinions and investigations. People are allowed to say, oh, I saw something crazy and I can't explain it. But what they're not allowed to say on this topic is, yeah, it's real. It's real and I believe it. With that in mind, let's move to our next celebrity, who is someone who is perhaps a little bit less well known, but is mountains more but is mountains more experienced and qualified to speak to this topic. I'm speaking, of course, of Jane Goodall, the late Jane Goodall, who I believe recently passed. Jane Goodall is not so much an expert on primatology and on primates. I would say that she is the expert, the global expert on primates in at least modern history. And she says in no uncertain terms that she is absolutely certain that Bigfoot or Sasquatch-like creatures exist, at least in some parts of the world. Let's listen to some of her clips right now.
As for the other, you're talking about Yeti or Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Is that what he's talking about?
Yes, it is.
Is that the message I'm missing here?
I think that's the message you're missing.
Is that right, Sharif?
Pretty much.
I'm out of the loop. Go ahead.
Well, now, you'll be amazed when I tell you that I'm sure that they exist.
You are?
Yeah. I've talked to so many Native Americans who've all described the same sounds, 2 who've seen them. I've probably got about, 30 books that have come from different parts of the world, from China, from all over the place. And there was a little tiny snippet in the newspaper just last week which says that British scientists have found what they believe to be a Yeti hair, and that the scientists in the Natural History Museum in London couldn't identify it as any known animal. Now, that was just a wee bit in the newspaper, and obviously we have to hear a little bit more about
Well, in this
that.
age of DNA, if you find a hair, there might be some cells on it.
Well, there will be, and I'm sure that's what they've examined.
There's so many stories. Like, I was in the midst of Ecuador with jungle all around and a few little isolated communities, and hunters used to go from community to community. So I asked my translator, I said, when you meet one of these hunters, all I said, have you seen a monkey without a tail? And 5 of them came back and said, oh yeah, there are monkeys without tails. They walk upright and they're 6 foot high. So take it or leave it. But
and do you have any idea, or theory as to what those might be?
Well, sort of maybe, remnant Neanderthals or something.
Huh. And no one took any pictures of those tailless monkeys?
Well, there are a couple of pictures which people refute and say they're probably fake.
Those famous pictures that we've seen, you believe those might actually be real?
Well, they might.
Yeah, okay.
2 notes on this. The first note is simply that I just think what she did to find out about the locals' opinion about Bigfoot-like creatures in, I believe she said it was Ecuador, is just so perfect, so brilliant, and I believe that it's so beautiful to see. She said she was talking to the local tribes and the local tour guides, and she asked them a very simple question. Have you ever seen monkeys without tails? And she wanted that, obviously, to prompt them naturally to anything that might come to mind. Maybe it would be a small monkey without a tail. Maybe they'd say, no, we've never seen that at all. All monkeys have tails. But that's not what they said. Jane Goodall says that in her experience, and this was one experience of many experts from around the world who she personally says she has talked to and heard noteworthy and trustworthy stories from, she says that the guides told her, oh yeah, we know the monkeys without tails. They walk on 2 legs and they're about 6 feet tall. But the second thing is, in that clip with Jimmy Kimmel, or is it Jimmy Fallon? I don't know. They're both absolute fools and buffoons, in my opinion. In that clip, look at how the late night host mocks the very idea from this expert, this qualified expert who has done more than he ever has in researching this topic and in going to the places where the people who claim that these things are real live. Look at how throughout her story he tries to make light of it and undercut her and interrupt her and make it sound absurd. And she, to her credit, doesn't bite off on any of it. She just matter-of-factly states the reality, or what she has found to be the reality of the situation. Up next, we have the famed outdoorsman and President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, aka Bauman. Now, I'm not sure that this is actually aka Bauman, but we'll get through that in just a second. Basically, in one of Theodore Roosevelt's books, we see that he shares stories of the frontier, of Western explorers who went out west through the Rocky Mountain region and beyond up into Canada, out to the West Coast, in these times when these areas were very unsettled, even though some of them are still very much unsettled, especially as you get into northwestern Canada. And in these regions, Theodore Roosevelt speaks about his experiences as a hunter, as an outdoorsman, as a trapper, and those of his community, the community of like-minded individuals. A quick note before we get into a summary of his story, which is known as Bauman's Tale. Theodore Roosevelt was not known at all to be a teller of tall tales. As a matter of fact, it's quite the contrary. Theodore Roosevelt was known to despise tall tale tellers and to despise men who didn't shoot straight and tell it like it was. He was someone who, by all accounts of the time and after through history, was a very straight shooter and heavily experienced soldier and outdoorsman. It is noteworthy then that in his book, he contains an entire account about a man known as Bauman. Now, there are some excellent videos on this that cover the entire account from his book word for word. I will link those down below. But here's the summary. Bauman goes to a very rural and difficult to access canyon that has something of a bad reputation because a number of trappers and explorers have gone up there and either have not returned at all or their bodies have been found in some state of abuse and dismemberment. Bauman and his friend go to this territory, and during the night, they are seemingly stalked and ultimately besieged by a towering creature, which they see looming in the dark and take shots at, which leaves tracks that are somewhat similar to a bear. However, it is walking on two legs, and it doesn't quite seem to have the nature and the abilities of a bear. It seems smarter, more cunning, and even more dangerous. Bauman and his friend ultimately get separated while doing their trapping duties, and when Bauman returns to his camp, he finds that his friend has been killed by this creature. Bauman, being an experienced hunter and tracker, is then able to assess what has happened, and he sees that his friend was snuck up on from behind while he was sitting around the fire. Something with two large fangs wrenched his head back, snapped his neck, and bit his neck, and killed him, and then rolled over his body in a sense of celebratory glee after dispatching what was seen, no doubt, as an intruder into its territory. Noteworthily, this is something that apes are indeed known to do. This type of celebration over rivals or over intruders, specifically the smarter apes like chimps. Bauman then basically leaves everything that he can't quickly and easily carry and hightails it out of there and tells the story. And Theodore Roosevelt says that he doesn't know whether or not Bauman is just telling a tall tale or perhaps just losing his marbles a little bit. But he says all he can attest to is that Bauman seems entirely sincere when he told this story. And Theodore Roosevelt found it noteworthy and reputable enough to include in his book. Now, this is why I said AKA Bauman for Theodore Roosevelt. There are significant theories that seem to make a lot of sense that Theodore Roosevelt could potentially be Bauman, and that because of the wild nature of the story and how somewhat ghoulish and fantastical it sounds, Theodore Roosevelt, number one, wanted to account for it because it actually happened to him in his younger years, but also didn't want to sound quite so insane as to put his name to it. So what did he do? He made up this kind of ambiguous character named Bauman and said, hey, it's trustworthy and it's someone who I think can be relied on to give an account of what they at least think they encountered, but I'm not going to really put my name to it in the book. There are some details around this that you can look up on the internet, but basically the timeline lines up in that in the time when this would have happened to Bauman, Theodore Roosevelt would indeed have been a younger man and more of an adventurer, and in the time when it was penned and then published, Theodore would have indeed, much like Bauman, been more of a grizzled, somewhat semi-retired, older adventurer recalling his tales of what happened. Whether or not that's the truth, we don't know. But I think it's at least a significant possibility worth considering. And what is undeniable is that President Theodore Roosevelt, who was just renowned for his knowledge of the outdoors and of hunting and of things of that nature, saw this story as being significant enough and again trustworthy enough that he thought it should be considered and read about in his book. Jumping from Theodore Roosevelt, we now have someone more modern and not quite as qualified, but that's okay. You don't have to be qualified to observe something real. And this is the Playmate model, Anna Marie Goddard. Now, Anna Marie Goddard's story is that she was out west having something of an adventure with some friends on a tour bus, and they decided to kind of on a whim go up a back road, and I believe she cites exactly where. I will put it up on a map on screen here if I can find it. and they go up on a road where no one knew that they would be. And long story short, in the middle of the night, and I believe she says it was kind of storming and raining outside, they saw what she believes to have been Bigfoot crossing the road. They actually do have some not so great footage of it. This happened, I believe, in the mid 90s, and they captured this footage that I will play now.
Describe, now you're serious. I've been teasing about it, but you're serious.
No, I'm totally serious about it.
Totally serious
yes.
about it. Describe the incident.
Okay, well, I'm doing this TV show called Adventures. And the main goal of this TV show this time was going up to the Redwoods, Northern California. And we had, been shooting for 5 days in a row, and, we were tired.
You were tired?
Well, yes, I was. Also, I have to include also that we were sponsored by Arrowhead and Corona, so,
So you were drinking, you were tired?
Yeah, I have to admit, I really,
It's late at night, you're drunk.
But I have it on tape.
Some guys...
The thing is...
You saw Ed Asner,
I have it on tape.
Oh, you have the tape, all right. No, what happened? So, how late at night was this?
This was around 6 o'clock,
6 o'clock?
Yeah, it became dark.
So it was dark.
And it, got rainy. And
Now, who had the... just the fact that you saw Bigfoot at the same time you had the camera. Explain kind of
Okay, well, that's what I was getting to, okay? We were partying, okay? So this tape that I have, this footage, was not shot with a big beta camera. It was shot with a little camcorder. And we just, filmed each other because we had fun. We were goofing off. And,
I would love to see that tape.
Yeah. So that's why we were like filming each other, being crazy, having Corona. Finally, we could open those boxes and start enjoying those.
Yes, well, we got enough points. It's okay now.
Beer.
Can I just say that I believe you, Anna?
Yeah. See? I'm sure that all the people here believe me.
Well, let's show the footage and then we'll discuss it. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Take a look. Now you be the judge. This is out of the window of the van. Now this is where is?
Come on, Jay. That's not a bear. That's not a gorilla or whatsoever. That's something different. That's Bigfoot.
Now, did the guys go out and chase after this?
Yeah, the guy with the camera went after it, and then 2 other guys.
And did they catch it?
No, they didn't catch it. It was dark. It was raining. It was really terrible, and I'm sure it was really fast.
Now, it is noteworthy to say here that Anna Marie Goddard was not known as any sort of a Bigfoot enthusiast, and nor did she ever seem to really in a mass way try to monetize this or turn it into a big thing. She just spoke about it as something that happened in her life. And she actually did risk and experience a lot of mockery, most significantly from the Jay Leno show, where Jay Leno on the air specifically called her out and basically just made fun of her for the entire segment, when she seems to be very sincerely sharing what she experienced. And this just goes back to what I first established with whether it's the other late night hosts, the Jimmys, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, or what Rob Lowe experienced from Joe Rogan. This goes back to this kind of groupthink pressure where everyone has already decided that Bigfoot is fake and that it's ridiculous, and that anyone who claims to believe in it, or even worse, to have experienced one, is just a kook or a liar. I think this is really unfortunate and really unfair, especially when we look at the qualified individuals who have had their encounters. Speaking of qualified individuals, we will cap off this part 1 section of this video with another qualified individual, a highly qualified individual. Some would probably argue that this man comes in either just behind or just ahead of Theodore Roosevelt when it comes to outdoorsmanship and experience as a hunter, hiker, camper, and survivalist. This is, of course, Les Stroud. Les Stroud shares his own account. Again, I will share that as a link down below. But the long and short of his version is that while backpacking and camping in the Northwest, I believe it was either the Northwestern US or in the Northwest of Canada. I will note that on screen if I have the specific location that I'm able to find. Either way, while out in the woods in a very rural area where there should not be any great apes or gorillas of any sort, Les says that he was setting up his camp for a Survivor Man episode. Of course, he does not film everything for Survivor Man. His cameras aren't rolling 24/7 because he would simply run out of battery and film too quickly. So he just films what he finds to be the most noteworthy and highlight portion of his survivalist experience. And so he set down his camera, and after shooting a quick portion of his setup so that people would get an idea of what he was doing, he stopped filming and got to the real work where he was just kind of blowing and going, getting through setting up camp. And so his camera was sitting there off on the ground, a few feet away from him. And as he was doing this, he heard something of a ruckus in the woods. He looked over, thought it was nothing, kind of kept going. And eventually he heard something like the notorious calls and pantings of a great ape, which Les Stroud was very familiar with, However, he knew that they should not be at all coming from the region that he was in. I will play some of the sounds that he makes to recreate it, and then I will play some of the known great ape sounds that seem to correlate with exactly what he's talking about.
As I walked towards my shelter, I heard a hair-raising, extremely loud sound that could only be described as something like a great ape grunting at me. I've heard many bears grunt, and this was nothing like that. What's more, it repeated it 4 more times very loud while I stood frozen in my step.
It was like this. And then I heard that sound about 5 more times, really loud, about 50 yards away from me.
He then did his best to get to his camera quickly and tried to document it, but he says that as he moved, ultimately he spooked whatever it was, and he heard it jump. He seems to think that it might have jumped down from a tree where it was perched and had climbed itself up to. Then he heard it kind of bang and crash and run away from him through the woods. And this is something that is also consistent in Bigfoot encounters, is that once they know that they've been made, so to speak, once they know that you know that they're there, they can and will move with great speed, strength, and great volume, just a very high level of loudness through the woods. This seems to be, again, a known tactic of great apes, that when they know you're there, they want to make themselves sound as big and strong and destructive and imposing as possible. Gorillas do this. They will bluff charge. They will actually charge. They will rip up trees in their way. They will pound and tear up the ground in front of them as a method of intimidation. These are things that great apes are known to do. And again, one of the most qualified people in the world to speak to this, Stroud, very much believes that something similar to that is what he experienced. He goes out of his way to say he does not know what it was, but it was convincing and thought-provoking enough that he went on to do a whole production dedicated to this topic. And if you watch that series, you will see that he very much believes there is something out there, and he's open-minded to the specifics of what it could be. But either way, Stroud, qualified individual, very much on the train. All right, we have quite a few others to go through, and this video is already getting kind of long, so I'm going to do a part 2 to this before too long. I think that's going to be my next video. That's all for today, guys. Have a good one.